The regular meeting for May 16th will come to order. We'll take a roll call. Ms. Cotter, can you take that roll call?
Yes, thank you. Ms. Cotter is here. Mrs. Grzymkowski.
Present.
Mr. Wiseman.
Here.
Mrs. Forrest.
Here.
Mrs. Dodd.
Here.
Mrs. Pastana.
Here.
And Mr. Carlson.
Here.
All present.
All right, thank you. Please rise if you can for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now look for a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Pastana, supported by Ms. Dodd. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ayes have it. Agenda is approved as presented. We'll get right into recognitions. Ms. Root.
Good evening, President Carlson, members of the Board of Education, and members of the community. It's my honor tonight to host our recognitions for this evening. We have several important recognitions. Excuse me. The first of which is we are recognizing those parents who served on the HVS task force. So, Mr. President, if you could join me at the podium, I'd appreciate it. I know some folks did email me and let me know they could attend. So if I call your name and you're here, if you could come up and just sort of line up in front of the board table, that would be fantastic. And while we do that, I'm going to just read the names and then hand them to President Carlson. Jody Greenshield, Heidi Hagel, Sarah Empey, Leah Gibson, Jennifer Pico, Julie Kavanaugh, Elizabeth Gilbert, Danielle Vivio, Michelle Neset, Lisa Sutton, Mandy Van Schalwick, Jenna Bays, Kelly Fry, Lisa Tidbury, Jennifer Nelson, Angela Willis, Catherine Snyder, Kylie York, Malie Rudy, Beth Laws, Christy Stempian, Heidi Humphreys, Melissa Kurth, Lisa Phillips, Jessica Grush. I hope we didn't miss anyone. We will get those certificates to the individuals. Ladies, if you wouldn't mind lining up right in front of the board table. And President Carlson, would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I want just a few words. So this task force, we've been meeting since October, I believe, and we've had over 9 sessions, I think 9 or 10. Dr. Salah and I were trying to figure this out. We had 3 missions with this task force when we started the year. Mission number 1 was to address the social and emotional learning loss that was experienced from the pandemic. That was goal number 1 for this task force. Goal number 2 was to address some learning loss and program enhancements that we could do in the school district. And goal number 3 was to address the new economy, prepare our students for this rapidly changing economy, for jobs that our kindergartners we don't even have names for these jobs that will be happening. So big task, and it wasn't just the parents' names that were just read. We also had administrators and teachers that were also a part of this group as well. A lot of great working sessions, a lot of heavy thinking, good creative out of the box thinking that took place, a lot of comments that has really helped to frame our thinking as a board, but also to frame our thinking as we move forward with the strategic direction of this school district for the next 5 years as we go into strategic planning. So grateful for each one of you to show up, dedicate your time and commitment and hours and a real demonstration of what parent advocacy is in this district. And we would like to pass out a coin to each one of you, and then I'd ask the school board to gather around as well. Okay.
So if we could get everybody out here for a picture, ladies, if you can turn your certificates around so we can see them, and let the board members kind of fill in. If you could come forward a little bit, let the board members fill in. Behind you, taller members of the board, behind. I'm never gonna be a taller member.
I'm never gonna be there.
Okay, everybody look here, and if you can't see me, I can't see you, so make sure you can see me. Big smiles. One more. Thank you very much. Thank you.
For our next item, I'm going to ask my colleague, Mr. John Tavernier, who has a brief presentation to talk about our next recognition.
All right, good evening. Thank you, Ms. Root. Good evening, Board of Education and members of the community. Look, we have a presentation. It's the stamp presentation. Yeah. So we are honored this evening to represent some of our students who received, are going to receive this evening a certificate of achievement for demonstrating high academic achievement of foreign language proficiency through outstanding results on the stamp test. So I want to spend a few minutes and just talk about what the stamp test is. So we're getting that up on the screen here. There we go. Thank you very much. So the STAMP test stands for the Standards-Based Measurement of Proficiency Language Test. It's a test that's an online assessment, and it measures reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills in a variety of different languages. And so students who speak another language, maybe either at home or have learned another language, or maybe English is a second language for them, can take the STAMP test in their for award of this certificate. So next slide. So this is available to students that are in 8th or 9th grade. This is a test out. So the high school graduation requirements require 2 credits of a world language. So that's roughly 2 years of a world language. Students who meet proficiency level on all 4 domains of the STAMP test can receive credit, up to 2 credits, for that language that they use at home or have studied previously. Next slide. So the criteria for earning credit for students who score a 3 or above in all 4 areas, the speaking, listening, reading, and writing, then they earn 2 credits for their high school graduation. So they're not required to take that world language course in high school. Or they can take 2 years, they could continue on in another world language or in the language that they speak. If they score 2 or above in all areas, speaking, listening, reading, and writing, then they receive 1 credit towards that world language requirement in high school. Below 2, then that's sort of the threshold to earn credit in high school. So all of the students here this evening, we've invited this evening, and we're going to ask them to come up. Were awarded 1 or 2 credits. And so next slide, we have the names of all of our students that received a STAMP certificate and will be earning high school credit. So for the students that are in the room, I invite you to come on up like the last group. So come on up here to the front, and then we're going to get your certificates to you and recognize you for the great achievement of earning high school credit in 8th or 9th grade. So come forward. Ashley, there we go. Congratulations, Michael. You guys all earned high school credit in eighth, how many are in eighth grade? Do we have any eighth graders here? 4 of you, and ninth grade? Ninth grade, congratulations. Good job.
Sorry, it's a big picture night.
We got one more. Is Cannon here? Where's Cannon? Tell her, come on.
Kim,
Is there more?
there might be more.
Oh, my goodness.
Did we miss a name here?
Where's Cannon? Come on up. Congratulations.
There are more students coming in for their government.
Come on up.
Come on up.
Guys.
You're coming right
Stamp
in.
recipients. You're gonna stamp, come on
There you
up.
go. You can help with that. Go ahead.
There we go.
Look at this. Okay, everybody, right here, big smile. Cheese. No, really say it. Cheese. Thank you.
I don't know.
Let's give one more round of applause if we could for our task force parents as well as our stamp recipients. Thank you. And before you get rid of me this evening, we have one final recognition that was not on the agenda this evening. A surprise, so I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Dr. Salah.
Thank you, Ms. Root, and good evening to everybody who's with us here in person, and good evening to all of those who are at home watching. Is everybody in the room that needs to be in the room? Good, that's who I was looking for. Very good. So every year we have, the Oakland Schools distinguishes an individual for their excellence in their particular field and craft. And that is around the business officials. And so we happen to have one of those here, and he happens to be pretty special. And so it's my distinct pleasure, this honor, to recognize Mr. Van Gotham as the Oakland County Business Official recipient. Let's give it up for Jeffrey. Jeffrey, I can't think of an individual that's more deserving of this award. You are competent, you're compassionate, you are cognizant of constantly wanting to do better and be better. I never have to point out a fault because you're always hard on yourself and want to be the best version of yourself. And we're very blessed and fortunate as a school district to have you here as our CFO. I'd like to take a moment here. I want to read the letter of recommendation that I submitted on behalf of Jeffrey here in front of all the folks that he supervises and his family, his wife and his children. To whom may concern, please accept this letter of recommendation on behalf of Mr. Jeffrey Van Gotham. I've had the pleasure of working with and supervising Jeffrey for the better part of the past 4 years in his capacity as Executive Director of Finance and then subsequently promoted to his current position as Assistant Superintendent of Business and Operations. Jeffrey is a competent Chief Financial Officer. as well as a good-hearted human being. He cares about the Huron Valley School District, its staff, and its students. All three of his daughters attend our schools, and his spouse is a teacher in our school district. They are a family that is invested in public education. As Assistant Superintendent of Business Operations, Mr. Van Gotham is responsible for the oversight of the Food Service Department, Transportation Department, Maintenance and Operations Department, and Business Department. And if I could give him another one, I probably would. He has been charged with systematizing our practices in all of his departments and daily rises to that occasion. He is actively involved in monitoring our $200 million bond and building site sinking fund programs. In addition to being a certified public accountant, Jeffrey decided that wasn't enough. He needed to complete his master's in educational leadership because he has a desire to be the best that he can be in his role in service to students and to staff of the Huron Valley Schools. While Jeffrey has never been a teacher or school building administrator, he always asks whether or not the expenses we incur are impacting the classroom. That always comes out of his mouth when we're talking about the way with which we're planning for kids. And I think that's important. This is precisely the kind of leader that we want in our school district and we want at the CFO role. Jeffrey's role on our leadership team is invaluable. While we are in the top 25 largest school districts in the state, we are a lean administrative team that manages many, many day-to-day complexities that accompany the work of a large comprehensive school organization. As superintendent, I feel fortunate to have the best colleagues to lead the work of the Huron Valley Schools, and there's no question in my mind that Jeffrey deserves this recognition as Business Administrator of the Year. Please accept my highest endorsement for Mr. Van Gotham. Jeffrey, congratulations. We're so proud of you. I think this is a testament to the caliber of people we have in this school district, people who are working on behalf of our kids and our students. I'd also like to invite Mr. Wiseman to make a few remarks regarding the history of this prestigious award.
Thank you very much, Dr. Slough. It is a distinct honor as a member of the Board of Education, to recognize Jeffrey. The Business Administrator of the Year, I've been a member of that organization for many, many, many years prior to my retirement. The boilerplate language, but you mean much more than that. Since 1998, the Oakland County School business officials have annually awarded a Business Administrator of the Year to recognize the outstanding accomplishments and contributions of school business managers within Oakland County. So I was extraordinarily pleased with Dr. Salah and Jeffrey's team nominating him for that award. But I also want to point out that this award, while there was a nomination, was also voted on and recognized by Jeffrey's colleagues. And I think that is a true testament of the outstanding work that Jeffrey does day in and day out on behalf of the students of Huron Valley. Because anyone can be a CPA who has a desire and can pass the test and do all of those types of things. But it takes a special individual like Jeffrey to take those numbers, to take those support areas that he's responsible for every day and focus on what's best for kids and what's best for staff. And you truly are correct in the sense that every time I talk to Jeffrey, he is laser focused on what's best for students. And I can't think of anyone that defines servant leadership more than Jeffrey Van Gotham. So I couldn't be happier as a representative, or I guess an alumni of the Oakland County School Business officials on their behalf, to recognize Jeffrey. Jeffrey was the president of the organization over the last 2 years, last year. And he is very well regarded amongst his colleagues, and we are extraordinarily blessed to have Jeffrey as part of our team. So thank you very much.
Jeffrey, on behalf of the Board of Education, Huron Valley Schools, our students, parents, and community, I am going to bestow this day to honor you for outstanding talent and dedication to Huron Valley Schools, leading to recognition as the Oakland Schools Business Administrator of the Year. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm caught off guard, so very humbled by this award. It's a wonderful opportunity, but couldn't do it without my staff, who's really top notch as well. I apologize. I've been losing my voice. I've been under the weather, but just very humbled by the opportunity. There's a lot of good business officials in Oakland County who do a very good job. Leading them through the pandemic was a little bit of a challenge, but you know, it was good work. I think we did it together as business officials, and you know, there's people who've been in this organization for a lot longer than I that have not won this yet. So again, just very humbled by that recognition by our superintendent as well as my colleagues. But I was actually supposed to vote for this award, and I reached out a couple weeks ago to see where the process was, and she said she would get back to me. So that, coupled with my staff slowly flowing into the meeting that they usually, I was pretty proud that they wanted to come see my budget work session tonight. But after a couple minutes, I was trying to put it together a little bit, but then yeah, it kind of makes sense now. So I'm very appreciative of the award for the opportunity. We have a great district. My family's very proud to be here. We love our girls going to school here. Just a really nice place to raise a family, and I'm glad that, you know, I ended up here, and this is a great spot to be. So thank you to my staff for being here, obviously on a Monday night. You know, we'll see if they stick around for the budget work session, but I'm very humbled and honored, and always love doing the work for Huron Valley Schools, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be recognized. So thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate it.
So we're going to do a picture with Jeffrey, his staff, the board, and Jeffrey's family. I know that's a lot of people, but we'll get them in. So if Jennifer and the girls can come up, Jeffrey's staff, the board.
Okay, everybody looking forward. Smile. Say Jeffrey's the best. Oh, that was good. One more time, Jeffrey's the best. Jeffrey's the best. Perfect. Thank you.
That concludes our recognitions too.
Okay, we're moving right along here. If there's any board comments, I have one at this point in time. Please make sure that you get them into public comment, excuse me. I've heard enough from the board. So. Public comment, please get them into Lori. There should be forms right back on the ledge. So please fill those out. Thank you. All right, we'll move to section 3, items from the superintendent.
Thank you. So I've got a couple things this evening. We have a presentation. So we started this evening with a recognition of our task force participants, and I would just share that we wrapped up our last task force meeting. We are planning to have a presentation at our next meeting in July that provides an overview and encompasses all the themes and topics that we discussed during the task force. Also, we'll be doing sort of an overview of where we are to date as it relates to our current strategic plan. And then as we shift into the next steps for planning for our next strategic plan, we'd like to provide an update to the board and to the community in terms of recognizing and honoring that good work that's been done to date. So more to come on that front. I wanted to share, this is quite an evening of recognitions. I also received a letter today from Oakland Schools, from Thomas Korth, who's the supervisor of transportation services, recognizing two of our transportation workers for excellence in transportation. Terry Allure and Susan Carter have been selected from the Huron Valley Schools for this award of distinction. And I just think it's just evidence of the people that we have here. We're really fortunate to have high caliber staff that work hard every single day on behalf of the students to deliver a high quality educational experience. So just a quick shout out there. And then my final comment is actually a presentation this evening. And I've asked Ms. Root to deliver this particular presentation. It relates to our safety and security update, and really is an overview and a synopsis of the recent audit that we underwent, as well as the various trainings and supports that we've implemented over the course of the school year. So, Ms. Rutt, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salah. Good evening again. So as all of you know, back in November, Michigan, Oakland County specifically, was rocked by the tragedy that occurred in Oxford. Mass shootings, school shootings occur way too often for any of us. Obviously, our hearts and minds are with the people of Buffalo this evening as yet another violent attack occurred. And so while we focus on schools and school safety, we know that these incidents of violence can happen outside of schools. What I'm most proud about in the 11 years that I've served in Huron Valley is the investment that Huron Valley has made in assuring that we have safe learning environments and safe working environments for our staff and our students. And so I'm just going to touch on a few things that we've done recently, and then open it up to the board for any questions. So we take a multi-layered approach to school security. We don't think it's one thing that you do, but a series of things that we do. We have a series of policies and procedures in addition to training that sort of help build the foundation of what we do from a safety and security standpoint in Huron Valley schools. One of them that you know about is the fact that if you approach our buildings and you're trying to visit our building, you have to show your ID before you gain entry into our buildings. During COVID, unfortunately, COVID limited the number of people that we could have in the building, but it did also help us really focus on those activities in which it was absolutely essential to have outsiders in our buildings outside of the learning environment. And so now we're starting to sort of ease that a bit and invite parents back into the buildings, but we're going to maintain a safe and secure environment as we do that. And so when we have visitors to the building, we're going to continue to ask that, you show your identification, you identify the reason for being there so that we can maintain that safe and secure environment. The other thing that we've done over the last several years is we've invested in what we call hardening of our building, in addition to technology. So you harden your building in two ways. One is through technology like security cameras, visitor access control. When we talk about hardening our buildings, we would have, making sure that our doors are secure, that, fencing is appropriate in proper places. We might have concrete bollards or planters that prevent entry in certain areas. And so those are the things that we reference when we talk about hardening our buildings. So our goal for HVS is ultimately to create a culture of safety within our schools that is embraced by all. In other words, safety and security in Huron Valley Schools is not the job of one person. It's the job of all of us. So it's the job of parents, it's the job of staff, and it's the job of our students. So when we tell our kids not to open the door for somebody, some people might say, well, that's kind of rude not to hold the door open for somebody coming in. But just the other day, I was going into one of our school buildings and I let the door slam behind me because the next person had to show their ID to come in. And so we teach our kids not to be rude, we teach them to be polite. But in this instance, we want them to not open the door for the next person because that's how we maintain a safe building. And so ultimately our goal is for everyone to buy in to the things that we've put in place, our policies, our procedures, and the hardening of our buildings. So recently, a group called Recon Management, which has worked with a number of school districts throughout the state of Michigan, throughout Oakland County, conducted facilities reviews of each of our buildings. I was fortunate to accompany Recon Management on each one of these walkthroughs, with the exception of 2 of them. And we started to see themes emerge throughout our walkthroughs. So a couple of the themes, items of note. So our visitor management and our access control is strong in our schools. So if you walk up to our front doors, generally, that is consistent across the school district, and we have a good visitor protocol in place. That's what Recon Management said. Our emergency operations plans are consistent and compliant across our buildings. Again, something I'm very proud of. One thing that they noted is that our drop-off and our pickup procedures can be improved to demonstrate elements of control. This is going to sound like a small thing, but one of the things they mentioned is that any staff member who's outside during drop-off or pickup should be wearing a brightly colored vest, like an orange or yellow vest. And there's a couple reasons for that, is because then anybody who might have a question, a parent or a student, can identify who works for that school, who might have the answer that they're looking for. Anybody who might be interested in doing harm in any of our buildings then would see there are a number of people out there who are identified as staff, and I don't want to mess with that because they're in control. So demonstrating the ability or that element of control is really important. And so now at our buildings, when you pull up to drop off your student, you're going to see people dressed in brightly colored vests, and those are our staff who are in charge. Like I said, it's a small thing, but it demonstrates that element of control. You all received a matrix of all the recommendations from Recon Management. Obviously, we don't talk about all of those things because those are, elements that we want to be able to maintain control of. So the board has that. We're working to identify areas where we can pay for those upgrades and what the timeline would be for those upgrades that were identified by Recon Management. Okay. Oops. Hit it way too many times. I want you to help me, Jerry. Go back. One more. There we go. So also we recently trained more than 1,000 of our staff members in the principles of run, hide, fight. As you can recall, a few years back, pre-pandemic, we did on-site training for all of our staff with the principles of Alice. The principles of run, hide, fight are the same principles, but these are principles that are endorsed by law enforcement throughout our community. And as you know, they assisted us with the training. So items of note through the training. Key support was provided by the Oakland County Sheriff, Milford PD, and White Lake PD for on-site delivery of this training. What's so important about that is that law enforcement, they really are the experts. We can train our staff as sort of the first responders, if you will, in a critical incident. But this is, again, a community effort. And so in any critical incident, we would be supported by these police agencies. So it's key that we do on-site training with our local police agencies. Plans are being developed for training new staff. So every year as new staff come on at the beginning of the year, we'll also provide them with this training. It's important that everybody have consistency in terms of how they're trained and what they're trained on. And then obviously our guest teachers and itinerant staff also are important to be trained in these principles. And then we continue to examine how and when we train students. So obviously teaching students about an armed intruder looks different at the high school level than it does at the elementary level. We focus a lot of our efforts on Safety Week, which is always the third week in October. And so again, we will look at teaching our students about how we keep them safe during Safety Week. And whoops, I'm not sure if you're doing that or I'm doing back one more. Jerry. And then also we've recently updated our emergency operations procedures for each building. Each building is conducting leadership meetings with their crisis response teams. We're also continuing to look at how we integrate our emergency operations procedures with our threat assessment and our TSIP process. So TSIP essentially is what happens after a crisis. And then obviously our threat assessment process feeds into all three of those are vital components in terms of how we prepare our staff and how we would respond in a critical incident. And then finally, we're developing a series of quick action guides. So I know that my committee, I showed them the last time we met, our emergency operations procedures are approximately 200 pages long. So what we know is that you can't memorize a 200-page document. So we're preparing a series of quick action guides that would be available to every staff member. So for example, what are the 5 things I do in a weather emergency? What are the 5 things I do in a gas leak situation? So that every staff member has access to that information. Jerry, one more. So future challenges, where do we go from here? Like I said, I'm very proud of the fact that in Huron Valley, we didn't wait for Oxford to occur. We've been doing many of these things for a long time, and we've been investing in school safety. I think one of the biggest challenges is how we continue to invest time and resources in doing this. I think that just like anything, these topics sort of ebb and flow in terms of our attention or school district's ability to pay attention to them. I recently shared this anecdote with somebody. I said that school safety is a little bit like if your kids ever played t-ball, like my daughter did, who's now 30, she played t-ball. And if you recall, when somebody would hit the ball, every kid on the t-ball team would run to that ball. And everybody was right there. And that's what happens when there's a school shooting, is that our time and attention get focused in that one spot. And then over time, other priorities sort of take our attention. And that just happens because we have so many demands on our time and resources. So there are competing demands for time and attention. But what I would urge us to do is continue to focus, keep safety and security as a focus of the district. And I'm proud of the fact that it will be part of our strategic planning process and will be built into that system. And so that's it. And if you have any questions, I'm open for questions.
Yeah, great presentation, and thank you, Kim. And you're absolutely right. It was Sandy Hook that occurred that motivated this school district to lean in on the safety measures. And you've been at the forefront of that, and appreciate those efforts. Of course, our mission is inspiring and building futures one student at a time. But in the military, they would always say, safety first, mission always. We're always about our mission, but safety has to be first for all our kids in the building. And I appreciate you taking the lead on that since 2012. I appreciate this district leaning in. I just heard up at the county that they're putting a grant together for the other 25 school districts that haven't done what we've already done here to do these assessments. We in this school district said it is important for our kids, our community, and we did it and took care of what needed to be done. So I just wanted to thank you for leading that charge and thank the superintendent for leading that charge as well. Open it up for any other comments for questions for Ms. Rutt. Mr. Weissman.
I also want to thank the community. The community recognizes safety first and the support that our community gave to us so that we could fast track a number of initiatives should be recognized also.
Dr. Slaw.
Yeah, so I just wanted to make a couple final comments as well. Carol Dweck, her book titled Growth Mindset, she talks about individuals and organizations that have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. Fixed mindset meaning no room for change. We've always done it this way. Growth mindset meaning there's always opportunities for growth. There's always opportunities to think outside of the box. And I can't express enough to our listening audience and our community how committed we are as a school district to constantly challenge our paradigm, constantly challenge ourselves to be better tomorrow than we were yesterday. Doing an audit is fantastic. Some people are afraid of that sort of thing because they're like, well, what's it going to say? Well, I want to know what we can do to take our school district to the next level. And so this exercise has been absolutely fantastic. We identified some things, some low-hanging fruit, some things we can do very easily that relate to people behaviors, right? And then some longer-term things that we can fold into our strategic plan. And Kim, just major props to you for your work, your leadership. I mean, you rolled up your sleeves after all this crazy pandemic stuff, if that's even the proper way to articulate it, and jumped right into run, hide, fight training. I mean, we've done the training, but to just give a refresher where people needed it today, you made that happen in record timing. And I think everybody knows this, and Kim has put it out there, so I'm just going to say it. But Kim's work is so well recognized that she has been named by the Michigan State Police the new director of their Office of School Safety for the entire state of Michigan. So again, we hire really, really good people in this school district, and they deliver on behalf of our kids. And I think we heard a lot of that this evening. So thank you again, Kim.
Any other comments or questions? All right. Superintendent, I think you still have the floor. Any other?
That concludes my remarks.
All
Thank you.
right. Items from the board. Do we have any correspondence? Madam
Nothing to
Secretary?
report tonight, thank you.
Madam Treasurer,
Nothing.
Madam Vice President?
Just, I attended the spring law seminar put on by the Michigan Council of School Attorneys, MCSA, and there were several topics that we're apprised of. Some were new to me and some were a good refresher. They included, student issues wrapping up the school year, including prom and graduation. And we did have a lengthy session on school threats and school safety, so that was extremely relevant these days. And then again, end of the year, beginning of the year issues, and just a review of evaluations and tenure, renewal, non-renewal procedures. So they packed a lot into 4 hours.
Thank you. Ms. Grisomkowski. Mr. Weissman. Ms. Dodd. All right. We'll now move to student leadership comment. Mr. Fletcher, come on up. From Milford High School, senior class president.
So I just want to come here today to give a few updates on what's going on at Milford right now, some accomplishments of the different athletic teams, what leadership's up to. So this week, Charity Week is going on at Milford. So the beneficiary of this year's Charity Week is the John Drypen Foundation. It's a foundation that supports students who have been battling long-term diseases throughout high school, and it gives them scholarship opportunities, things like that. So over $24,000 has already been raised for the John Drypen Foundation. And we haven't even come close to finishing Charity Week. So Milford students will engage in a variety of activities throughout the week, including a Mav Ball tournament on Thursday, a male pageant / talent show on Friday. The girls tennis just had their LVC championship, and they were the runner-ups. And then they also won the Howell Invite recently. And then the Huron Valley United girls lacrosse team won the Lakes Valley Conference as well. And then both the Milford boys and girls track teams went undefeated this season, 9-0, and won the LVC Conference Championship. And then boys baseball is currently sitting at a 13-9 record, and they recently beat Walled Lake Central and Lutheran North on senior night. And robotics, they always have a wonderful program. So they recently finished up their season. They won the Troy District, which was composed of over 40 teams, and they made it to the quarterfinals at the state championship. And then they recently competed at the world competition in Houston, Texas, and they finished 7th out of 456 teams, which is very, very strong. And the National Honor Society chapter is hosting a walkathon this Saturday to support a local mental health foundation. So I think that's all that's really going on, quite a bit, but thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight and highlight some of the accomplishments of our great Milford students. Any other questions? Or?
Yeah, any questions for Brad? I just wanted to comment. Thank you, Fletcher, for being here. I
Yeah,
know
of course.
you've got a couple more weeks to go, and
Yeah.
you've got a lot of celebrations. I think tomorrow is honors night. Is that right? Or
Wednesday.
Wednesday,
Yep.
excuse me. So appreciate that, and congratulations to you as well. I know you had a great swim year in regards to your team and the competition that you did for Milford High School. So congratulations to you. Any other comments, board members? Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Association comment.
So many great things going on in Huron Valley. It's always hard to follow Fletcher. Good evening. I hope everyone has been enjoying the beautiful weather. There definitely is a feeling of summer in the air. And after the buses rolled away from the buildings this afternoon, we have 22 school days remaining, not that anyone is counting. A year ago, we had high hopes that the 21-22 school year would bring us back to a much more normal year. And in some sense, it did. But in a lot of ways, this year was also incredibly challenging. And many would say it was even more challenging, frustrating, and exhausting than last year. So as we begin to close out the school year, I want to take a few minutes tonight to recognize our dedicated educators and give you a glimpse into their lives and paint a picture of some things you may not have thought about that impacted our educators this year. Many, many months ago in September, we welcomed over 1,000 students who were in our virtual academy last year. Transitioning these students back into our classrooms took patience and kindness, as some of our younger students had never been in school buildings before, and many of our older students were very nervous to return. Our educators built trust with these students while helping them to learn the routines of a building classroom and connecting them with their peers. Additionally, the mental health of students across the country dominated the news this year, and Huron Valley was no different. Our social workers, psychologists, and counselors work closely with our classroom teachers to support our students who were experiencing intense emotions and helping them to develop and practice important coping skills. With strong emotions sometimes comes behaviors of concern. So working with our students to regulate their emotions and find positive outlets for these intense feelings was evident in all of our buildings across the district. As some of our students had learning gaps from the previous school year, our special education staff and our literacy coaches partnered with our classroom teachers to examine the educational needs of our students. This year, in particular, carefully assessing our students to determine if a student qualifies for special education support was a much more challenging task, as the past 2 school years impacted the academic growth of some of our students and necessitated teasing apart a learning gap versus a learning disability. Earlier at the year, at many of our board meetings, Dr. Salah talked about the shortage of guest teachers. We are so grateful for our permanent guest teachers in our schools, but unfortunately for much of the year, it was challenging to have enough guest teachers to cover our teacher absences. When this happens, our educators take turns giving up their prep time to cover their colleagues' classes, thus increasing the amount of planning and grading that they do on their own time after school and in the evenings. And most of all, this year has required a lot more TLC. Our educators, more than ever, work to build positive relationships with our students. We know that these connections are the foundations of a student-teacher relationship and the key to academic growth. This year, students needed more time to share their concerns, more time to understand new concepts, and more time with an understanding educator to help meet their needs. Our educators, in a quote normal year, go above and beyond to support our students, families, and community. And here we are at the end of year 3 of definitely not normal years. Our educators show up each day for our students. Our educators show up each day to support each other as colleagues. Our educators show up each day to partner with their administrators. And our educators show up each day as we continue to work together day in and day out, no matter what comes our way. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I have 3 citizen participation forms. I'm going to call each of the 3 individuals up to the mic. And then if the other 2 can just wait behind the person at the microphone. And then if there's any other public comments, please make sure that you fill out a form. We will close public comment after this section. So I have Michael McDonald. I have Michelle Lozon. Hope I said that right. And I have Jacob Dimmick. And Michael is from Milford and he resides in the district. Welcome, Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good evening. And thank you to the Huron Valley Board of Education for allowing us to speak this evening, and we really appreciate it. So I wanted to start off, I was asked to speak by my wife, who has our 5-year-old over at T-ball next door. So I have some very important points that she wanted me to make sure that I hit, but we've also came to this as kind of a personal vision of where we think we can help support. And I know we were recently made aware of the recent task force and the wonderful work they've been doing. So we're kind of riding on the coattails of these ladies. So we want to thank everybody for that. So really, I know I was told that next year the budget is being submitted for review tonight. And I'm a proud parent of 2 Kurtz Elementary students, an active member of the community. So I'm standing here tonight to discuss what I feel should be reflected in the next year's school budget. Our school does an amazing job, and I would be the first to say, from a social and emotional learning aspect. However, I feel that there could be additional support, and we may be only touching the surface. I know there were some comments about the pandemic, and I think we've all been impacted in many different ways, and we may not know the full impact for years to come, right, on the kids. So, and that was really apparent to us. We had a situation come up with one of our oldest, and we were dealing with the local social worker at our school, wonderful lady. And you could see just the time that I think we were there for about an hour, and there's kids knocking on the door, and she's constantly, tending to these children. And I believe all the staff were too. And it just made me go, wow, okay. So there's definitely an increase. And I myself work in senior living, and I work on the other side of the age spectrum. So, and there's been different effects on them as well. So it was really eye-opening to us to see that. So, and I know everybody in here understands the statistics. Again, my wife printed out some, and I was reading through them, and some of them were surprising to me. But the one that stood out to me, 57.8% of kids in Michigan, ages 12 to 17, who have depression did not receive any care in the last year. So that, I understand that's statewide, right? And again, I feel like our school does a tremendous job. And so we just wanted to make the point that for your consideration, that these things be truly looked at as a potential for good. So I wanted to say, take the part-time PBIS position to full-time, make SEL a permanent special in rotation, and then add 2 additional psychologists that could route through the 8 elementary buildings and potentially help support other buildings if possible. We'd really like to rally together, the parents. I know the administration has, a big job on their hands, and with the teachers. And I think, what we're really wanting to do is rally parents. If we, sorry.
Oh, that's
Could I finish my
sorry.
sentence? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
We would like to rally the parents, and really we're looking for guidance on if there's additional funding down the road, and we have to go to legislation for that. We'd be more than happy to do that. So I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Michael. Michelle, who lives in Milford community and resides in the district.
Hello, good evening. Excuse me. My name is Michelle Lozon. I'm a parent of a 4th grader at Kurtz Elementary and the PTA president going on my 3rd term. I've spent a lot of time inside Kurtz. I've seen firsthand what teachers and staff deal with on a daily basis. This includes our 1 social worker and our 1 part-time PBIS professional. My first year as president, the pandemic hit. During this time, the board and I decided we would do everything possible to support our teachers and staff. We worked closely with our principal and staff to ensure they felt supported. We were lucky because we had money in the budget to purchase supplies, equipment, resources, games, and lots of food to support our teachers. I also work full-time as an HR manager. When I got hired 6 years ago, I thought I hit the jackpot. The company had the culture and the vibe I was striving for in my professional career. There were 3 other HR managers in the same role. They were there to support the company along with myself. I handled a variety of HR tasks under the HR umbrella. Fast forward to today, 2 years later, 6 years on the job. I'm the only one left in my department. It's not because they chose to leave, it's because of the pandemic and all the accompanying issues that came along with it. And my job has changed significantly. 85% of my day is dealing with employee relation issues, much like our social worker and our PBIS professionals. There were, and there will continue to be employee relation issues. Turnover is at an all-time high, and retention is a struggle. There are many times I felt like quitting. I was overworked and tired. Excuse me. I've been contacted by recruiters from competitors to interview for new jobs and entertain the idea, interviewed, received offers. After discussion with my current senior executives of my company, I realized there are no plans to add additional headcount in my department. And it's something I struggle with every day. Because I've experienced firsthand the staffing challenges many businesses are facing and the retention challenges that I'm currently facing, I'm here today to propose adding headcount at Kurtz changing or allowing our PBI professional to go from part-time to full-time. This would allow students to receive that proactive care and services that they so desperately need. Furthermore, I propose adding 2 additional full-time psychologists at the elementary level to rotate between the 8 buildings, allowing for 1 additional day in the cycle at each building.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
All right, I have Mr. Dimick. I don't have community. If you want to state the community, I do believe you, it says here you reside in the district.
That's correct. I live in Commerce Township.
Okay,
Good evening. My name is Jacob Dimick. I'm a resident of Commerce Township and a parent in the HVS district. I would like to discuss classroom size today. It's come to my attention that HVS is planning to increase classroom sizes in elementary education, with some schools eclipsing the 30-to-1 pupil ratio. This would be a travesty and a detriment to our young children on the heels of severe learning loss attributed to the ineffective and disruptive COVID response. The last time I spoke here, I remarked on the approximately 750 students our district has lost since the beginning of the pandemic, which resulted in approximately $6.5 million in lost annual operating budget. Since then, we have seen schools discussing other very divisive and politically charged gender-related content that will assuredly result in more students' departure from our district if it's not quelled. Additionally, talk of COVID is circulating heavily in our area again, and I would beseech our board to stand up for the parental rights instead of, again, alienating families and further negatively impacting our enrollment. The National Council of Teachers of English said that students in smaller classes perform better in all aspects, in all subjects, and on all assessments when compared with their peers in larger classes. The positive effects of small class sizes are strongest for elementary school students, and they become more powerful and enduring the longer students are in smaller classes. The National Institute for Early Education research indicated that minority students benefited the most from small class sizes. Academic performance is important, but it's not the only benchmark of student success. In the area of student engagement, findings consistently show the value of small class sizes. Along that line, teacher quality has for some time been recognized as the most important variable in the academic success of students. Recruiting and retaining effective teachers has become increasingly important and difficult as school districts impose mandates about student test scores and overall academic performance. Class size has an effect on the ability to retain effective teachers because those with large classes are likely to seek other positions. However, the teachers with the large classes are usually rewarded, but they're rewarded with extra students because they're usually the most effective teachers. So it's kind of a catch-22. They do great, they get more students, then they get burnt out. One of the most common arguments against smaller class sizes is financial. School districts claim they can't afford it to reduce the size of classes because it's too expensive. However, it's also very expensive when students leave public schools to attend a private one. Research shows that class size is one of the most significant factors in a parent's decision to send their children to private schools. As the National Education Association stated on Education Week in an advertisement, they said, "We need a little class." Indeed, if public education is to be a class act and U.S. schools are to become world-class, improvement should start at the class level. We
Thank
need
you,
to become
Mr.
a magnet
Dimick.
district.
Thank you, Mr. Dimick.
Thank you. And the first step to do so is smaller classes.
Thank you, Mr. Dimick.
My pleasure.
Miss Levin, I know I don't have an address here.
I feel like I just live here.
Yeah, you.
I live in Commerce. We do school choice to Huron Valley.
Yes, all right.
All right, so I am speaking tonight on 2 different things. The first is on behalf of a teacher who couldn't be here tonight. She wanted me to speak about class sizes. It sounds like there's been some discussion behind the scenes about decreasing staffing to fit into budget rules or something like that. I don't know. But the end result would be increased class sizes, packing the classes to 32 or 31 kids for upper elementary and 27 for lower grades. The district just had teachers do professional development on the brain and what works and what doesn't work and what increased issues we're seeing in students since the pandemic. Class sizes should be lower, not at the maximum. This teacher's child will be a fourth grader at one of the elementary schools next year, and the current plan is to pack 32 or 31 students into 2 sections in 2 classrooms, not to mention putting them with a teacher who's just returning from her own illness and adding more stress to her life. So this teacher is hoping that the board can figure out other ways to keep class sizes low. And as a personal aside for myself, I homeschooled my kids last year, and it's amazing how much can get done when there's only 2 kids in a class. And I realize that 2 kids is impossible in a public school, but even 20 kids, 24 kids is certainly much easier for any teacher to manage. If you just count how many times it's, stop talking to your neighbor or get your finger out of your nose or any of that, that's all distractions and it adds up during the day. Those of you who are former educators, I'm sure, have spent a lot of time telling kids those very things. So whatever can be done to keep class sizes small, I think is something the board should really, try to focus on. And I'm sure that you want what's best for kids, but this teacher asked me to speak on her behalf, so I told her that I would. So, second thing, it's come to our attention. First, Dr. Salah, thank you for sending some communication out, I think to teachers. It might be coming to parents. I don't know where I saw this, but some communication about, reminders about what the COVID rules are. We thank you for not putting masks back on our kids' faces, as some other districts in Oakland County have done. There still seems to be some uncertainty with how teachers and administrators in certain buildings are managing this. Some kids are still being told they can't come back without a negative COVID test. They're being told they can't come back unless they're wearing a mask. And I don't think those are the rules. I think it's people's interpretation of the rules or misunderstanding of the rules. And we certainly don't want kids to be singled out, right? If you're the only kid in the classroom wearing a mask, you're the kid who had COVID. We wouldn't ask any other kid to do anything differently if they were different in any other way. So I think, continuing to allow things to be a recommendation is the right thing. And that's what you're doing. I just think that there needs to be a reminder sent to staff and school administration, like these are the rules. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And it needs to be consistent. We just want to get through the next 22 days and have everybody be happy, no kids be sad, and go into the summer all thumbs up. So thank you all.
Thank you, Ms. Levin. All right, is there any other public comment? Any other public comment? If there is, please fill out a citizen participation form. If not, I am going to close public comment. And then I want to thank those who provided public comment tonight. I have on record 2 public comments from individuals asking for funding or additional funding for emotional and social learning, as well as allocating budget for additional headcount at Kurtz. And then I also have 2 comments regarding class sizes in elementary school. So I just wanted to recap what we heard here this evening. I know those are operational issues for the superintendent, but I appreciate those public comments this evening. We'll now move to reports from the board committees. And the executive committee, we met on May 9th. We continued our review of the bylaws, which we'll be voting on this evening. The bylaw policies will be before the board. And then we started discussion on the 1000 series, which are administration policies, which is not in front of the board this evening as a new item, or we still have work to be done on that. So and that took the better part of 2 hours. So that's what we worked on in the executive committee. Any other comments? All right, and then we'll move to the Finance and Operations Committee. Madam Treasurer. We'll come back to you.
Come back, okay. Finance and Operations, we met on Wednesday, May 11th at Administration Building. Present were myself, Mr. Wiseman, Ms. Cotter, Dr. Salah, Mr. Van Gotham, Ms. Kerrigan, Ms. Maruskin, Ms. Timberlake, Mr. Rogers, and Mr. Wimmer. There was no public comment. We discussed the budget work session. Jeffrey presented, summarized, and discussed in detail the proposed 22-23 budget. He then answered a bunch of questions from our committee, clarifying and backing up his reasoning. And the budget work session will be presented to the board at this evening's meeting for further discussion. We discussed under unfinished business, the playground equipment. The committee discussed an additional bid received by Game Time, and we are still anticipating one more from BCI Burke, both our consortium partners. We will await their bid and table this until our June 1st Finance and Operation meeting. It was also asked that Little Tykes be added into our co-op, so that discussion will take place with Chuck at Max Services. The Oakland Schools budget was summarized and discussed. No further questions were added after the review. We are asking the board to support the attached resolution in support of the 22-23 Oakland School budget as required by law. New business was the Oxbow storm drainage. TMP has completed the engineering and design of the new storm water piping system. We have received a price from T&M Asphalt Paving to remove the old piping, install the new storm water piping system in the amount of $124,297. We are asking that the board award T&M Asphalt Paving the contract for new storm water piping at Oxbow Elementary. And this will be, project will be funded from the 2020 capital projects. T&M Paving is also who we're using for Oak Valley. In other, Don Rogers from Clark Construction updated us on the bid pack 4 remaining punch list items. As you know, dedication plaques were installed. And bid pack 5 photos continue to show our persistence in staying ahead of schedule. Progress made for happy committee members. The door and, we did have a discussion with Bill from TMP and updated the committee, and we discussed night lockdown hardware. After much discussion and assessment, we would like this to be also a part of our strategic planning process. Board policy review, 6,000 finances. We introduced the first set. There's nothing that's coming to the board tonight. And the plan is, the goal will be to complete by the end of summer. Meeting adjourned at 11:58. Next meeting, June 1st.
All right, thank you for that report. Ms. Dodd, TLT.
All right, he moved my chair, moved my reporting time. I'm so uncomfortable tonight. Okay, TLT.
I'm moving your cheese.
Our last meeting was May 6th at the Huron Valley Schools Administration Building, called to order at 10:08. Present were myself, Ms. Cotter, Ms. Pastana, Mr. Tavernier, Dr. Sala, Ms. Bjorkman, Mr. Lindberg, Ms. Thompson, and Ms. Nemeth, who we recognize because she is very, very close. She graduated with her work toward her doctoral degree. So hopefully soon we can just doctor the whole thing. 2 doctors in every meeting. That's a good way to do it. On our regular agenda, we went through Board Policy 5000 series. We reviewed the enrollment and health services policies. They'll be brought back for an additional review at the next meeting. We also reviewed student progress reporting and activities. Mr. Tavernier distributed the next set of policies for review, cross-referencing the current student progress report and activity policies. The committee was asked to review these policies in preparation for the next meeting. We also reviewed Section 11T, the equalization grant. Mrs. Bjorkman shared an overview of the allowable expenses for Section 11T equalization grant funds. The information will be shared with various stakeholder groups to collect input on addressing needs of students that were disproportionately impacted as a result of the pandemic. Under other, we talked about consent agenda items. Health services is one. The committee supports the recommendation to award a contract for health services to Interim Health as presented. This exhibit will appear on the agenda this evening. OTPT, the committee supported the recommendation to award a contract for occupational and physical therapy services to Kids in Motion as presented. This exhibit will appear on this evening's consent agenda. We talked about future meetings. Mr. Tavernier shared that student leadership will be invited to the next meeting, along with the new student leaders from the class of 2023. We also discussed a little bit more about teacher recruitment and future needs. We adjourned at 12:17 p.m. Our next meeting will be this Friday, May 20th at 10:30 a.m. in the administration building.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to communications, marketing, and legislative. Ms. Forrest.
Thank you. Yes, Communications, Marketing, and Legislative Committee met on Friday, May 6th at the admin building. The meeting was called to order at 8:37. Members present were myself as chair, Ms. Dodd, Ms. Grismakowski, Dr. Salah, Ms. Loso, Ms. Coven, and Ms. Root. There was no public comment. Regular agenda items included our legislative update from Dr. Salah, who provided an update on the budget proposals from the Michigan House and the Michigan Senate. And each of the proposed budgets had some elements that were a little concerning. There's some good things about it, but also some other things. And the legislature is anticipated to finalize the budget negotiations sometime in June, but not prior to when HVS will need to finalize the school district's budget. Oftentimes that's happened. It's kind of backwards, but, we follow the law. Communications update from Ms. Root. She provided information regarding website welcome videos produced for each building, as well as information on the upcoming Family Fun Fest. Ms. Colvin shared the most recent edition of Education Matters, and I believe you can find that information on the Education Matters she sends out every Friday and on our website. Security update. Ms. Root indicated that she will present, which she did tonight, very well. A summary of school safety tasks completed since the events in Oxford. Recreation and community education, Ms. Loso provided profit and loss numbers for both pools and fitness and recreation and community education. While the total community schools function is operating at a profit, the pools and fitness operation continues to be a bit of a drain on those profits. And this is primarily due to staffing and then lack of demand of memberships. We adjourned at 9:53 a.m. Our next meeting will be held at the administrative offices on June 3rd at 8:30 a.m.
All right, arts, athletics, and activities.
We have not met, but we will be meeting next week on the 24th of May at 4 p.m. at the administrative building.
Thank you. All right, we'll now move to section 9, consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve A1 through A5 as presented?
I'll move that the board approve consent agenda items A1 through A5 as presented.
Motion made by Ms. Dodd, supported by Mr. Weissman. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Thank you. Mrs. Dodd?
Yes.
Mr. Wiseman?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter is a yes. Mrs. Grisomkowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Forrest?
Yes.
Mrs. Pastana?
Yes.
And President Carlson?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Something I just want to point out, you'll see, and we'll get to this in a few minutes, but our items that are in bold represent those items that are being voted on this evening. So with that, we're going to move to section 10, unfinished business. And can I get a motion to pass the resolution calling for a representative to vote in the election and then the candidates that we intend to? Before we explain, I'll get a motion. So you're going to make that motion?
I'll make the motion to move that we accept the resolution with the designee of myself and the alternate of Mr. Wiseman. And then we have two candidates that we did approve at an open meeting. And they are Mr. Scott Gottlieb and Mr. Connie Williams.
Is there support for the motion? Supported by Ms. Pastana. Any other questions? So there was 5 candidates, is that correct?
Yep, there are 5 candidates, and this is for the Oakland County School Board. And unlike school boards across, public school boards across the state of Michigan, the Oakland County school boards are elected from the combination of the 28 districts here in Oakland County. And so we are the designees. I went to a forum for the 5 candidates. There's 2 open positions. Last week, the candidates talked about themselves and what they could do for us in the county. And then we discussed it with our full board and agreed upon the 2 aforementioned candidates.
All right,
And
thank you
they're
for
2 6-year terms.
Thank you for that recap. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, and we do have the resolution that's filled out. Is that right, Lori? Denise, yeah, we'll certify it. All right. We'll go ahead and take a roll call vote.
Thank you. Mrs. Forrest,
Yes.
Mrs. Pastana,
Yes.
Ms. Cotter is a yes, Mrs. Grisomkowski,
Yes.
Mr. Wiseman.
Yes.
Mrs. Dodd,
Yes.
and Mr. Carlson.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes 7-0. Thank you for volunteering to do that on behalf of Huron Valley Schools. All right, we'll now move to board policy, policy bylaws, the 0000 series. Can I get a motion, Mr. Weissman?
Yes, I move that the Board of Education approve the board policy bylaws 00040 series as presented.
Do I have support? Supported by Ms. Cotter.
Yep.
All right, we have a motion, and I just want to kind of highlight, this is a big packet that we have in front of us that we've been working and combing on, and I don't intend to go through each one of the sections tonight. But I did want to share with this board, of course, as well as the public, there were a couple of what I would say material changes on a couple of policies, and I want to make sure that I go over those. Number one was on 0166 that had to do with the agenda. And we are going to have a slight change in the agenda. So the agenda we will call to order. We will have a roll call, pledge of allegiance, and approval of agenda. That does not change. We'll now move to a section 2 called communication and reports. There'll be the board president communication. We will have recognitions as we've had, school presentations, superintendent communication, student leadership communication, as you heard tonight, association communication, board correspondence, and treasurer's report. We'll also hear from the reports from the committees. We'll then move into section 3, which is public comment. At that point in time with public comment, the intention, and we were moving away from agenda versus non-agenda items into voting versus non-voting items. It's very important for us as a school board to protect the First Amendment speech of our citizens. And that is why we will start to highlight the agenda for those items that we intend to vote on. So those members in the community that would like to speak on an item that we are presenting, we will ensure before we vote that we hear all of those comments. If it's an item that we aren't voting on and there isn't enough time, then additional public comment will be reserved for those that have filled out a public comment form at that point in time. So I'll get into the public comment a little bit more, but I just wanted to share that significance on the agenda. And then, of course, we will have consent agenda, unfinished business, new business, and as I mentioned, additional public comment if needed, good and welfare and adjournment. So not a lot of changes, some subtle changes in the agenda, but I want to make sure we point that out. The big change, though, will also come from any item that is bolded will be made available to the public on the Friday preceding the board meeting. So our regular board meetings are on Monday. By, I believe, noon on Friday, they will be made available for the public to review what we are voting on. So in our march towards more transparency, we continue to do that as a district, and that's a change that's being recommended in the bylaws. So that represents 0166. The other change is on public comment, which is 167.3. And I touched on it just earlier in regards to making sure and ensuring that we are hearing from our community. It is our intention to set aside 15 minutes as section 3 of the agenda. But as I explained to the board members here as we were talking about this policy, if we have 25 members that want to talk about an item that is being voted on that evening, then we will hear all 25 members, and I will, the presiding officer, whoever that is, will ask for additional minutes to be provided to hear from all 25 members of the community that want to speak on a voting item. Any members, so if there's 25 members and 20 of them want to talk about a voting item and 5 of them want to talk about something that's not being voted on that evening, then we will more likely than not move them to the additional public comment at the end of the agenda. We will close public comment. So I will make a call, as I did tonight, a few times if there's any public comment. And then we will close public comment at that point in time. Anybody who's got their public comment form in will make sure that they're able to address the crowd. So the board at that point in time. So I think for the most part, like I said, that's important for us to make those changes. It's important for us to safeguard this constitutional right of our community. It can be difficult as a board and to hear public comments. We've all experienced that across, not only in this school district, but across the state and across the country. But what is very important in this role is to make sure that our community is heard, especially before any votes are cast. And that's the opportunity, and we'll continue to hold that as a sacred part of our responsibility as a board. And then the other material differences actually exist up in section 0171, point 2, point 3, and point 4, which is really the officer positions. We didn't have a line of succession other than if the president is gone, the vice president takes over. But we wanted to make sure it stopped there. So in the absence of a president and a vice president, then there'll be the treasurer. In the absence of those 3 officers, then it would be the secretary. So that was a change. Other than that, I would say some of the other changes were minor in nature, but I wanted to make sure that I was pointing that out to everyone. Are there any other questions or comments in regards to any of the policies? Mr. Weissman.
Yes, I just want to point out that these policies, while it's a primary responsibility of the Board of Education, once policies are in place, they are out on our website. If and when board policies are changed through this process that we're following over the course of the next several months, those policies then will be posted out on our website, meaning that the new policies that have just been voted on, if approved, will be the policies that we are governed by. Correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Any other questions or comments related to the bylaws? All right. Hearing none, we'll go ahead and move for a roll call vote.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Wiseman.
Yes.
Ms. Cotter is a yes. Mrs. Grzymkowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Forrest.
Yes.
Mrs. Dodd.
Yes.
Mrs. Pastana.
Yes.
And Mr. Carlson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sufficient voting in favor of the motion. The motion passes. We'll now move to board policy, student code of conduct, 5,000 series. Can I get a motion?
Yep,
Ms.
I
Dodd?
move that the Board of Education approve the Board Policy Student Code of Conduct 5,000 series as presented.
And
I'll
supported-
second. Yep.
And supported by Ms. Pastana. All right, can we just get a recap before what's in front of us?
Sure. So this is all of the components to the Student Code of Conduct, and we thought it was important to do this early on in the process to make sure that all of this was adopted and clarified before the start of the next school year when students and parents are able to review this at the start of the year. So we moved through, there wasn't much incredible change, at these meetings. So just to give you a little bit of clarity about the process, we were given and this is the package, it's pretty thick. We were given this at a meeting, we reviewed every single policy, we took it home, we read it. We came back to the next meeting, highlighted it up, flagged it up, and then went through and talked through every single policy to make sure we were really confident with it. Then we came to this body, we presented it at the last meeting. Everyone's had an opportunity to read, and now we're moving forward. In this package, the only changes that we really made that we felt were important was in 5605. We wanted to define students with disabilities to make sure it was very clear for the reader to understand what that means. And it really is as defined by federal and state law. So we wanted to make sure that it wasn't, that we were really clear as to who was determining if a student has disabilities. So we added that statement. And then in policy 5610, is we talked about the emergency removal or short-term suspension language defined in school code. And we wanted to know, is this language defined? And the answer is yes. This is referred to as the SNAP suspension and is still relevant in Michigan. While not in our existing policy, it's been followed and practiced. It's recommended that the language be added. So we did that. Also in policy 5610, it discusses due process rights that appear in this policy and 5611. We were wondering if the redundance was necessary, and it was recommended to keep the language in both policies. It may seem redundant, but typical school districts get tripped up by not following due process when dealing with suspension. So we will find in these policies that if it's appropriate to be redundant, it's redundant so the information is right there when a family member may be looking up a certain issue or another. And the great thing about Neola is as laws change and these things need to get updated, it's all now going to be organized with a nice little bow so we can do that. But otherwise, material changes are not significant.
Okay, and then just as a reminder, it's the Student Code of Conduct series tonight, right? There's other sections of the 5,000 series.
Yeah, there will be another section that we will bring forward, which will be the last really. So we think of this as being about a third of students of the 5,000 series. The other 2/3 we'll bring together as another package.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Dodd? Who's been leading that charge? Ms. Cutter.
I don't have a question, just a comment about sitting on the committee, that it certainly was reviewed by the whole, committee. And I would certainly let the board know for their support tonight. We did a good job. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Mrs. Dodd?
Yes.
Mrs. Pastana?
Yes.
Mrs. Cotter is a yes. Mrs. Grisomkowski?
Yes.
Mr. Wiseman?
Yes.
Mrs. Forrest?
Yes.
And Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion passes. All right, we'll now move to the Oakland ISD budget. Who's the presenter on that?
That will be Mr. Van Gotham.
So this, excuse me, so this came up in new business at the last board meeting. Since then, I have not had additional questions or concerns, but before you this evening is a resolution from the Oakland ISD to approve their 22-23 budget. And it's a requirement of this board to either approve or disapprove by June 1st of every year. So we're asking the board to approve the resolution for the 22-23 budget for Oakland schools.
So that's your recommendation, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And then this has been discussed in Finance and Operations?
Yeah,
Ms.
it's the
Pastana?
committee's recommendation that we approve it tonight.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, can I get a motion then? Ms. Pastana?
Sure, I'll make the motion.
Motion to approve the ISD budget and supported by Mr. Weissman.
Support.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Van Gotham or Madam Treasurer? Seeing none, we'll move for a roll call vote.
Thank you. Mrs. Pastana?
Yes.
Mr. Wiseman?
Yes.
Ms. Cotter is a yes. Mrs. Grisomkowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Forrest?
Yes.
Mrs. Dodd?
Yes.
And Mr. Carlson?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, motion carries. We'll now move to new business and I'll turn it over to Dr. Salah.
Thank you, President Carlson. And this is going to be Mr. Van Gotham's item, but I wanted to make a couple comments this evening regarding the budgeting process. And I also have an ask for our community. I mean, we heard some really meaningful public comment this evening, and I appreciate those comments. I want you to know that you were heard. And certainly, I think there's wide-scale acknowledgement and recognition that the more we can do as it relates to social emotional learning and class size, it's obviously in the benefit of all of our children. So just a couple of thoughts I'd like to share here, and I think it's important for our listening audience to know and understand this. And I know Jeffrey will go into greater detail. 85% of our budget is in people. It's investing in the professionals that we hire to serve our local school district. And that budget is determined by the contracts that we negotiate. So when we talk about class size reduction, I think that is a worthy discussion that we should have every single year. But I just want our community to be mindful that every time we reduce class size by 1, it's roughly 0.7 to 1% of salary increases. So it's like the challenge is if you don't follow the contract and artificially reduce class size, that's less that we can do to retain the people that we need to educate our kids. And so I just want you to hear that. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have those conversations. We should, and we should always continue to do our best on that front. But I think that that's an important thing for all of us to hear. And you know, this current year we carried about $2 million in additional staffing, and that was to artificially keep those class sizes down. The year prior to that, we carried, I think, $1 million to 1.5 to artificially reduce class sizes. And we've really tried over the last few years as it relates to this pandemic to keep those at a manageable level. We can only do that for so long. So that's an important thing to lift. A secondary thing as it relates to SEL, I just really want to ask our community, please reach out to Senator Jim Runstead. Please reach out to Representative Matt Maddock. Please reach out to Representative Ryan Berman. Please reach out to the governor's office because they have a direct impact on the way with which we're funded. And I will tell you right now, there are 3 budgets out there. One is the governor's proposal, one is the Senate, one is the House, and you're going to hear more about that from Mr. Van Gotham. But what I want to specifically mention is the Senate version cut out any supports that were initially proposed by the governor for mental health in schools. So in order for us to do more, we need those dollars. And so I would ask you, put out a call to our local representatives and our senators because we need a specific categorical that can't be used for anything else but supporting social emotional supports. We've doubled our social workers in recent years. We added this year a behavior interventionist full-time for all 8 of our buildings. The PBIS system is something that is somewhat unique to Huron Valley Schools. Most school districts don't even have that. So we're doing a lot of really great things as it relates to SEL, but that's one thing I could ask of you tonight is please reach out because we need the governor, the Senate, and the House to agree on mental health supports and social emotional supports for local school districts. So Jeffrey, I'm sorry to steal some of your thunder there, but I wanted to make sure I touched on a couple of those points because of some of our comments this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Salah, members of the board, and members of the community that are here this evening. So this is not necessarily the first step in our budget process, but more of a discussion on, as of now, where we stand and where we're headed as far as the 2022-2023 budget is concerned. So really, as we make decisions throughout the year and as we have discussions both in the building level, at administrative level, at the board level, through committees, you know, that, as I mentioned earlier tonight, the impact on the classroom, where it's best to utilize our dollars is always something that's at the forefront of how we make some of our decisions. So we're not gathering input in the last 2 to 3 weeks. We're doing that throughout the year. And really, you know, listening to our staff, listening to our building leaders, and really trying to put forth the best effort with the dollars that we have available. And so with that, we develop recommendations, and then this evening is discussing those recommendations. So again, for the viewing community, both here and in the audience, or those that are listening through the online process, we're not asking for an approval of the budget tonight. We're merely having a conversation We've already met with our Finance and Operations Committee. I will be going to a couple other committees in the next couple weeks to really answer any and all questions, but we've had these conversations throughout the year, so this is not something that the board is taking a look at for the first time this evening. You want to hit it one forward for me, Jerry? Thank you. So this is a summary, very brief summary of the revenue and expenditures of the last couple of years that we had audited. So for those that are listening, we are a June 30th fiscal year end. So we obviously in the 1920 year started the pandemic. 20 and 21 was still a pandemic year, which ended last June. And we're working through the 21-22 fiscal year as we speak. And so you can see, as it stands right now with the projected budget for the rest of this year, we're going to look at a fund balance that's going to be about $9.3 million or 12.3% as a percent of our unrestricted revenue. And that's important because that's kind of the benchmark that the state of Michigan is using for us and every other school district, and staying above a 5% level, because if you're down below 5%, then that could be a possible takeover from the state of Michigan, or really strong recommendations or suggestions that they might have for you to get out of that deficit spending, if you will. So as of 21-22, we're looking at 12.3%, but then, based on the projections, we're moving down to 6.7%. And again, as Dr. Salah mentioned, a lot of that comes with moving out of the pandemic and having some very heavy dollars from a grant perspective for us that are slowly moving away. So we've been very blessed the last couple of years with millions of dollars in support from the federal and state governments, which we're all very appreciative of. But those dollars are slowly moving away from us as we move into the 22-23 year. We're still wrapping up ESSER 3 funding that we have not taken down the total dollar amount that's available to us. And again, as we mentioned, 11T is not a part of this budget in this presentation. So that's the remaining dollars that are available from essentially our pandemic or additional funds that were available for us out of our normal course of operation. So this kind of goes into a little bit about what makes up our revenue and our general fund. And thank you, Jerry. When you look at our revenue, it's really broken down into local, state, and interdistrict sources. Local sources is primarily driven from the non-homestead taxes that we receive as a district. And so a majority of this dollar amount is coming from businesses and second homes that reside in Huron Valley School District. And again, most recently, last November, the community came together and approved an extension of that, which we're very appreciative of. And so we receive a little over $10.5 million in non-homestead property taxes. The remaining can be earned from early childhood revenue, as well as pay to participate for our athletic programs, as well as gate fees for some of our bigger sports that we're able to charge for. State sources is primarily driven from state aid payments that are made to us through the state of Michigan, and you'll see a little bit more information in a later slide. And that's the primary driver of the revenue we use to operate Huron Valley Schools. The money we receive from the state of Michigan. Interdistrict sources comes from a county-wide millage called the PA 18 millage, and we receive most of our funding in interdistrict through that, as well as some Medicaid monies that are received to help offset some of our special education costs in particular. So again, we're showing a little over $91 million for this fiscal year that we're in right now. So this is a little bit about the foundation allowance, which really drives the estimate for our budget for the upcoming 22-23 school year. This is a brief summary that shows you the executive, Senate, and House versions of the foundation increase. So back in February, the governor proposed a budget that would increase our foundation allowance $435. Senate came through a couple months later with $450, and the House came through with $300. So in this budget work session that we have this evening, Huron Valley Schools is using $300 as that foundation increase. Obviously, as a district, we want to have more than that per pupil, but in our budgeting, we want to make sure that we're going to get at least that dollar amount, and we're pretty confident that we're going to get at least $300 per pupil. We're also using a projected student count of 7,770 students, which is about a 250 pupil reduction And again, that's just an estimate because we won't know those student totals and or the dollars till later in the fall and even the spring of next year based on enrollment. So you can see we're adding about $2.3 million for just a foundation increase as it relates to this upcoming budget. This gives you a little perspective on our pupil count. And so this is an FTE count. So we have total students and then we have full-time equivalents, which is what the state funds us on. And as you can see, from 2012 and 13 through the projected year of 2020 and 2023, we have decreased in most years. And a lot of that's associated with birth rate. We've talked about that before as a district. We are not the only district that has faced that challenge before. And then in the 2020-21 year in specific, which was last year, the state, again, in my opinion, was very generous and allowed a super blend for pupil count, which really helped us out and kept our pupil count at 86, 82 based on funding. And so that was really helpful for us because like other districts, there were students that just really fell off the face of the earth as far as public school and enrollment. So we have an 80-20 student count this year based on FTE. And then we're projecting a student count next year of 7770. The next one for me. Yep, there we go. Nope, one back for me. So this is kind of a summary of the revenue that we're projecting as well as next year's anticipated projected budget. You can see we're updating local sources for just a couple $100,000 for a small uptick in local property tax revenue as well as some early childhood revenue. We are predicting a bump in state sources. Again, I had talked about the 2.3 million from foundation increase, but we also have to take the effect of losing 250 students into play here. And so we're still showing a positive effect of state sources and then keeping interdistrict sources relatively flat. Usually sometimes the county will come out with an additional bump for us based on those districts that have special ed student counts, and sometimes that's to the benefit for us. So that's always a good adjustment at our first and second quarter budget adjustments. Next slide. This is the expenditure categories for the 21-22 year. And you can see basic programs and added needs, the two largest dollar amounts up top, are really classroom focused. Adult and continuing ed, pupil, instructional staff, school administration, which is like the office of the principal. Again, large dollar amounts that are all classroom driven. So between our instructional buildings and the actual classrooms themselves, our focus is always the classroom and the students and staff in those buildings. We do spend money on business services. We have an operations and maintenance staff that does a tremendous job. We transport more students than a lot of districts that are like us in the county as well as the state of Michigan. We have 99.6 square miles in the district, and we drive approximately to Europe and back on a daily basis. We have a very robust transportation program, but they do a wonderful job. We have obviously an athletic program. We have community services, central services, and then other financing sources. It's important to note that we were able to offset some of our general fund expenditures this year as a result of some of the grant monies that we received from, again, the federal and state sources. So that's a blended blessing for us and a reason why we were able to keep our fund balance relatively high for this fiscal year. Next slide. This is the same expenditure detail depicted in a graph. And you can see, again, basic programs and added needs are the driver of the district. And those are classroom driven. Pupil is additional supports within a classroom, instructional staff, and school administration, again, directly impacting the classroom environment and the school buildings in particular. The other expenses we just talked about briefly, like transportation and operations and maintenance. Next slide. This is an important slide, and I think it shows, again, the value of Huron Valley schools versus even like districts within the county and the state of Michigan. When you see the Michigan average, instruction and instructional support services, Oakland County and Huron Valley schools are actually putting more of their dollars directly into those two functions, which is important because that's, as a taxpayer and as a father of daughters who go here, not only being the CFO, it's important that our dollars are going towards the kids in the instructional buildings. We spend less on general administration and business than the state average. Our operation and maintenance is pretty close to the same. Transportation is the same. Again, we transport close to 50% of our students every day to and from school. And then our other services and community services are pretty similar. What's important to note, and what Dr. Salat alluded to before this presentation, is that between salaries and benefits, we do better than our other districts. So we are one of 5 to 10 districts in the state of Michigan that keeps all of the employees employed in Huron Valley. So we do not privatize services such as food service, transportation, or maintenance and operation. Those are all Huron Valley's staff that receive salaries as well as benefits and retirement. And that makes us different because if you look at the other category, which is contracted services, both Oakland County and Michigan are above 20% and we're at 16%. So really, you know, we are about people. We're a people business. Our students are first. And you can see that, you know, when we make decisions, it's really about people. And so I think that's important. It's a point of pride for me, at least, being in the district, and as well as the direction that this Board of Education is taking to put people first and really do the best by their people. And that's why we spend so much money per dollar on people. Next slide. So this is kind of a chart of revenue and expenditures with the last year kind of being bubbled a little bit for what's projected to be the remainder of the year. You can see that, you know, we've done our best to hover between revenue and expenses as best as possible. We had that really good year in 2021, which again was a direct driver of additional funding we received, not only from the state and federal sources, but also the Oakland County, which gave us a really nice $1.3 million contribution that helped us out with that second year of the pandemic, really. Next slide. So this again shows some of the audited results at those levels that I mentioned in the earlier slide with the 2020-21 year. You can see that our instructional expenses went up. It's not only as a result of some of those monies coming in from the federal grants that were used to pay people, but we also negotiated with all of our contracted groups in this last fiscal year. And so you can see those are the effect of the raises as well as the, you know, uptick in retirement insurance costs for those employee groups. And we're happy to do that. I think we did really good with negotiations, and, you know, we're able to settle with all of our groups in the last fiscal year. You can see that most of the other columns are pretty consistent. And, you know, we went up this year, but again, it's a primary result of on-schedule raises that we provided for our staff. Next slide. And so this is what the potential could be for the end of 22-23. Again, this is a work session. This is not a budget that we're asking the board to approve, but merely, you know, what if 11T is one of the grants that's still remaining? We're not able to even put our application in. It's due in about a month from now. We have already started to gather data, see what we're allowed to spend this grant money on. And as we have done in the past, it's really going to be about people, as I noted with that 85% salaries and benefits. So having people in the district continuing to do the good work that they do for our students. And so if we receive the $4.5 million that we've been allocated, and if it does impact the general fund as we expect, it very well could, we're going to end up with a fund balance at the end of next year between 12 and 13%, which we're pretty happy with. And that allows us to, again, continue to pay our staff, which is paramount to our success as a district, and will keep us, you know, in a good position for years to come. So I have to give a shout out to, you know, earlier today, there was a little recognition for the business official, which came as a surprise, but I did have a couple staff that stayed until the very end. And so Heather Kerrigan is our director of finance, and she's a big driver of this presentation, as well as Gina Moreskin, my executive assistant. They were very instrumental in putting this together, and we couldn't do it without them as well. So yeah, yes, absolutely. So that's it for the presentation, President Carlson.
All right, thank you. I'll open it up for some questions. Just a couple of comments here first. I appreciate the comment on the outsourcing. I forget what graph that was, but I think that's important to uplift that. There was an attempt and a big wave that not only in the state of Michigan, but across the country to outsourcing janitorial staff, bus drivers, food service workers. Huron Valley stood by those employees through that time and said it was important for them to be part of our district. We weren't going to adopt strategies that shoved people off of their health insurance for 6 months and made them requalify for it. And I think what's really important to note is we were one of the first school districts to come back online when we had the bus shortage issue this last year. And a large part has to do with the fact that our busing operations weren't outsourced. So that is a benefit. And I know other school districts are looking at that model. However, they've gotten rid of all their buses. They all belong, to another contractor now. So I think that's a very special thing that Huron Valley has. And it also puts us in a unique opportunity to have discussions about transportation and our WODA organization now, which that would be a different discussion and it wouldn't be with us. So those are some collateral benefits I think that need to be uplifted in this, and thank you for pointing that out. Any other questions from our Finance and Operations Committee? I know you've seen this once already. Mr. Weissman?
Yes, a couple comments. Number one, thank you, Jeffrey, and your compatriots as it relates to this presentation. One of the arts of finance is to be able to present it in such a way that people can understand it. So I appreciate that. Couple of just observations. Number one, if you look at, what is it, slide 10? We can go to slide 10, possibly. Sorry, Jerry. There you go. Slide 10. I think it's really interesting. If you look up at the yellow, in Huron Valley Schools average expenditures per pupil membership, we're at 12,407. Certainly appreciate the 12,407. But if you just look at the Oakland County average, we are below what the Oakland County average is, and that's who we compete with. And we're approximately $1,400 per student below that, which then equates out to roughly about 1.2, 1.3 million. Would that be accurate?
Yep.
So we have about $1.3 million less than the average school district in Oakland County. But at the same time, we're spending 80% of those dollars that we receive. But that 80% is less than what the average school district has, because they're spending 80% of their dollars, which is $1.4 million more than what we do. And when I look at a budget, I look at where that money is being spent, and our money is being spent where it needs to be, and that's within our staff, because they are providing the services that are necessary for our students. And as President Carlson said, the other thing that I look at is the fact that I'm very proud of the fact that the people that are providing the services, our students, are our employees, and many of them live in our community. So I think that's extraordinarily important. The other observation that I have, and I believe we could just even go to the last slide, 13. We look at what our fund balance is, and you had mentioned that there's a benchmark that we can't fall below, because if that occurs, then the state of Michigan comes in, and there's a variety of steps that we have to take to get it above that 5%. I think it's also important from an observation standpoint to show where it says revenue minus expenditures. We're a bracketed $4.2 million. That's a structural deficit. And right now, without those federal dollars, we have $4.2 million as a structural deficit, because we feel that it's important to provide those services again for 22-23, but we're spending money out of our bank account. And it's just like at home. If you don't change your spending and you're taking money above and beyond what you're making in wages out of your savings, that eventually will catch up to you. So we are taking a look at that and continuing those services that we feel are absolutely necessary for our students at a tune of 4.2 million. The good news is that we are also anticipating additional dollars that the state has that they have not released to local school districts of approximately 4.5 million. That will take us out of that structural deficit. But as we've talked about in finance and operations, and I think it's important to note, just from an observation standpoint, those are one-time only dollars. And with a one-time only dollars, there's not a revenue stream there. So we have to be very, very aware of that. And with one-time only dollars, we need to make certain that we have been fiscally responsible and also strategic, because we are also investing in our people and in our programs with reoccurring costs with one-time only dollars. And it's not unique to Huron Valley. It's something that every other district is also doing in many different ways. And there is a funding cliff that we are going to be facing along with our colleagues. And I think that's important from where I sit as a member of the Board of Education representing the community, that we are advocates and we make certain that our representatives who are working through this budget recognize that we have these demands and these requirements to provide to our students. And without additional dollars, as Dr. Slaw said, as it relates to the different funding sources from the Senate, the House, or the governor, if we don't have those additional dollars, how do we provide those services that our community and our students desperately need? So I appreciate the presentation. I understand where we're at. I think it's, once again, it's student driven, it's student focused. And with it being student focused, it's people focused. And we're providing the revenues that are necessary to support our people and to retain them and to bring the very best and brightest to Huron Valley. But there are warning signs out there within this budget that we have to be very, very aware of. And as we move forward, we have to be strategic as it relates to that. And I'm very excited about the fact that we now have moved from the task force into the strategic planning process, because we're really looking for a partnership with our entire Huron Valley community to provide the very best services that we can provide to our students. But it takes the whole community working together to make that happen and make that a reality. So those are just my observations, my comments, and I do applaud administration to be student focused and making certain that the dollars are being spent where they need to be spent, and that's in the classroom.
Thank you, Mr. Weisman. Ms. Don.
Yeah, just briefly, Dr. Sala talked earlier about advocating and reaching out to our lawmakers. And I know I've heard from a number of parents and teachers and folks who say, but I don't know what to do or how to do that. So if you're struggling with what to do and how to do that, send me an email. I'm happy to walk you through what that looks like. It's much easier than you think. Our lawmakers' offices are set up and they have wonderful people who answer the phone and listen to what you have to say, and they write it down and they say thank you and they hang up. It's super easy, but knowing what you want to say and that sort of stuff in advance is really important. So reach out if you need help, and also there are some great resources on the web. Fundmyschools.org is the Michigan School Finance Research Collaborative, which is a bipartisan effort to really figure out how much does it actually cost to educate a child in the state of Michigan. And it's interesting information, and it's an interesting foundation to at least look at as we're considering budgeting and what we have in Huron Valley Schools. We get to move the money around, but we don't get to create it and bring it in. But we really need a great partnership with those people who are allocating and putting the dollars where it needs to go. And so what we're saying is, we could certainly do a lot with more money, but we're going to do the best we can with what we have.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Grisomkowski.
So we have 3 different proposals, one from the governor, one from the Senate, one from the House. And we are just looking at the foundation increase for each. Do any of those proposals include additional funding in other areas that we could potentially have some cost savings to the district? And is there a proposal that we believe is more advantageous to Huron Valley that we could advocate for?
So yes and yes. The first question was, are there all three of these budgets have things above and beyond the foundation allowance that will benefit Huron Valley schools? Again, because we know what our expenses should be, we've been very conservative on the revenue side. So anything above and beyond this will be beneficial for the district. Without being prejudiced in a budget work session, the governor who came out with her original budget had a lot of things for schools. And so, as you're, making recommendations to if it's the state senators or House representatives, the governor is trying to fund schools along the line of the, fundmischools.org, as Mrs. Dodd just alluded to. So there's money in there for staff retention, which is wonderful. There's some additional dollars for special education funding, and mental health is really addressed in that budget. And so as I heard from the public tonight, as well as comments that have been made over the last several months, if you're really looking for something that is kind of a can't miss, I'm a fan of the governor's budget, which came out now 3 months ago. So that's my personal opinion. I'm sure, those other members who have also read line by line, like I have, could tell you their thoughts, but I'm a fan of that one just because it puts a lot of priority in the things that I'm hearing the community as well as the board stress, which is really, for what it's worth, very similar in the conversations that I have and listening to the community as well as what the board has had to say. So.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? I just wanted to point out, there's a resolution that's moving at the county in regards to schools, school districts for mental health, putting $10 million aside. Now that's one-time money. So that's always, like you mentioned, from a reoccurring perspective, but that can help you get a jump on some things or backfill some positions until other things come along. But just be aware, that there's a grant that's going to be coming up there. So. All right, seeing no other questions, we'll move to new business item B, which is Oxbow storm drainage.
Are you taking that one, Jeffrey?
Yes, I can. So as was mentioned in the Finance and Operations Committee minutes from this evening, we brought for the board tonight under new business the Oxbow storm drainage. So we've had some drainage challenges over at Oxbow. That was one of the 4 schools that we did work on last summer in Bid Pack 4. And so as part of that analysis, we have T&M Asphalt, which is part of our cooperative. It's a community partner with us, and they've given us pricing that we think is reasonable and has been vetted by our architect. So we're bringing this tonight under new business, and I'm available to answer any questions. But again, we'll have a couple weeks here before we do a final sign off, but it is our recommendation that the board take action on that at the next meeting. But it has the Finance and Operations Committee support as well as Business and Operations.
All right, so that'll move to unfinished business then at the next meeting. Okay. All right, any other questions or comments? All right, we've already closed public comments and heard from everyone. So now we'll move into good and welfare. Any good and welfare? Ms. Dodd.
I closed my book with my notes on it. This weekend, 2 Milford High School thespians participated in the Sutton Foster Awards. Ben Mondrush and Jillian Armstrong were selected to participate in this competition for musical theater. And for the 3rd year in a row, they had won a student as a finalist. So congratulations to Jillian Armstrong for her 3rd place finish in the Sutton Foster Awards.
Any other good and welfare? All right, just a couple items. Student leadership breakfast, still trying to nail down a location, but that will be from 8 to 10. I think the TLT meeting will take place at 10:30, so that can keep you on par for that. So we'll have the student leaders from Lakeland, Milford, Harbor High and IA there to give us their feedback on their time here this Friday at 8 o'clock. Location yet to be determined. And then I just wanted to remind too, the public and the community, I'm happy that we've got existing board members that are planning to run. There will be one open seat for the Board of Education. Obviously, there's 4 seats that are up, but there will be one open seat that I am stepping down. I've mentioned that before, so I will not be running. But I'm encouraged by the members that have come forward and said that they're interested in continuing to serve on this board. So there'll be one seat that's a 2-year term that will fill out the balance of Mr. Long, who had stepped down and resigned. He will be joining us at the next board meeting as well, so that we can put him on our honor roll and honor him for the work that he's done in this district. And then there'll be 3 other seats that will be 6-year terms. So I just want to make sure the community knew that. And if they have any questions, please reach out to Dr. Salah or myself. So, and with that, seeing no other good and welfare, this meeting is adjourned.